So today we're going to be talking about the characteristics of quadratic functions. So I went ahead and put that in the table of contents. Mine is going to be on page 7, but yours may be just a little different. Okay, so I'm not going to go into too much detail because we are going to cover this later on in the semester. So I'm just going to go over just some important things that you all should know about quadratics right now. So first of all, we're gonna talk a little bit about what a quadratic function even is. So there's a lot of ways to define it, but basically I'm gonna put right here that it's a parabola. So that's basically what a quadratic function is. It's a parabola, and it can either open upward or it can open downward. Okay, so that means that my parabola can either open upward, so it's like a smiley face, or it can be a little frowny face and open downward. So I'm just gonna put that right here. Okay, so now that we know what a quadratic function is, let's go into the different parts of a quadratic function. So the first thing is the axis of symmetry. And basically what the axis of symmetry is, it's a vertical line that divides your parabola into two equal halves. So I'm gonna put vertical line, divides parabola in two. Okay, so let's go ahead and, first of all, since it's a vertical line, we know that it's gonna be some x value. That's important. Okay, so let's go ahead and give an example. So let's do first an upward parabola. So let's make this my parabola. Okay, so it's a vertical line, so I know it's gonna come straight down, and it's gonna divide my parabola exactly into two. So that means it's gonna go something like this, right? So axis of symmetry, we have to make sure that both sides are symmetrical. So then my axis of symmetry, my x would equal 1.5. And if it's downward, it would be the same exact thing. So it's a vertical line. And for this one, my axis of symmetry would be x equals -1. So the next thing is the vertex. So the vertex is, that's basically just the minimum and the maximum of the parabola. So I'm gonna put right here the minimum, which is the lowest point, and the maximum, which you guessed it, that's the highest point. And when we talk about vertex, you're always going to hear HK. So this HK is a fancy way of just saying x and y. So at the point xy is the vertex of my parabola. So at HK, that's the vertex. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So first I'm going to do a upward parabola. Well, that came out kind of weird. Okay, so in this, for the upward parabola, my lowest point is right here. So that is going to be my HK. And if I'm going to have a downward parabola, the highest point in my parabola is right here, and that's the vertex, which we're gonna call HK. Now say we did add values to this, and say this was -3 and this one is -3. Remember, my H is my X, my K is my Y, so if I'm going to write it down with values, I'm just going to put -3 comma -3, and that would be my vertex. And same for the downward parabola. Okay, so my next one is my intercept. So for my intercept, we all know what intercepts are. So it's where your graph crosses the x-axis and the y-axis. So my graph crosses the x and y-axis. So let's see, we can have a couple of examples. Say we have an upward parabola. Our x-axes are going to be where our x-intercepts are going to be where it crosses the x-axis. So that would be at this point and at this point. So those would be our x-intercepts. And let's say that we had another example that looks like this. So we're going to have 2 x-intercepts and 1 y-intercept up here. So those are our intercepts where the graph crosses the x and the y-axis. Okay, so let's look at the last one, the standard form of a quadratic function. So this is what the standard form looks like. And all of what we saw, this plays a big part in it. So there's something really important about the standard form. A, B, and C must be numbers, and A cannot be 0. So A cannot be 0. Why? Well, if A is 0, that means we're saying 0 times x squared. 0 times anything is going to be 0. So that eliminates this x squared term. So pretty much, if we don't have that x squared term, all we have is a linear function. So that's why this is very important. Okay, so let's talk about this A part. So for this A part, this determines whether our graph is upward or downward. So our A, remember A is just a number. It can either be negative or it can be positive. If A is negative, that means that we have a downward parabola. And if A is positive, that means it's going to be an upward parabola. So if you look over here at this C is always going to tell us our y-intercept. Always, always. And those are characteristics of a quadratic function.